Hello, and today I'm going to go through some thoughts around servant leadership. Earlier this week, I ran what was an extremely interesting and I hope and it seems worthwhile event for people on this subject. So, servant leadership, very often misunderstood, and I've labeled this, is it the possible or the impossible? Well, it could be either, dependent entirely on circumstances. So let's have a look at whether servant leadership is really possible or not. So here are the 5 questions I really want to focus upon. What is servant leadership? Sometimes people get confused about this. They feel that's to some degree a subordination, an abdication of leadership. It is not. It is an active, highly performance-oriented form of leadership. It's by no means about shy people taking a back seat. So what is it? I want to explore that. What are its origins? Robert Greenleaf, in an excellent book, I've got it up there on my shelf, and an earlier essay on servant leadership in 1969, the first book was written in 1977, claims ownership of it and has generated a lot of really worthwhile material. The Greenleaf Institute continues to do so. British Army, as I'll say a bit later, could actually claim to have got in there earlier. We'll see. Why is servant leadership so rarely seen? Well, I'll explore that, basically because it's a very hard thing to achieve. True servant leadership can give serious payback. It really can. I will contrast servant leadership with what I call command and control. Do as I say. I have all the ideas, my way or the highway. Whether or not leaders think they squelch contribution, they diminish people's feelings of worth. That's what a lot of leaders do. Servant leaders don't do that. Servant leaders are intuitively better in that respect. And is the move from command and control too tough? I think for a lot of people, frankly, that it is. Let's explore some of that. So we'll start with some thoughts around what this thing called servant leadership is. Slaves do what others want, servants give what others need. Let's make some distinctions here then. Servant leadership is not about being a slave. Servant leadership isn't just about being told by others what to do. Servant leadership is an active process by which you consciously and continuously think as a leader, what can I do that can give the people who I work with, I have responsibility for, need? What do they need that I've not given them enough of yet? It isn't about saying, what do they want me to do and I'll do it. It's about saying, what do they need? How can I help them? That's quite a shift for a lot of people. So here's another Ken Blanchard. He's always good on a lot of stuff around leadership. He certainly is on this. And again, servant leaders don't think less of themselves. They just think of themselves less. Command and control leaders think of themselves all the time. It's all about them. It's their ego. It's their desire to show that they know so much, and by contrast and by inference, other people know so little. So command and control is a diminishing, for me, form of leadership. It lessens the contribution of others. Servant leaders are all the time thinking not of themselves, but of how they can do what they can to enhance the contribution of others. It sounds a bit idealistic. Maybe it is for a lot of organizations. So here you go, origins. There's the book. 1977 was the first publication, the first version of this. Greenleaf, right up to his death, and in a sense beyond, in terms of the institute in his name, has generated a wealth of information on this. Robert Greenleaf, Larry Spears, many others associated with the early years, 1977 onwards, although his initial essay, which I've tracked down, is from 1969. However, and this might surprise some, the British Army, in the guise of Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, that's what's on the front cover here, published Serve to Lead in 1947 as a first edition. And Serve to Lead, servant leadership, is in there, therefore could be said to have its origins in the British Army's Bible, as it's known, for the graduates, the officer cadets that come out of Royal Military Academy Sandhurst. So there you go, 30 years start on Greenleaf. This, incidentally, is not a heavy tome. It's full of short-ish anecdotes, summaries, 1 and 2 page anthologies, if you like. Altogether, it's an anthology on leadership. A very good read in itself, and a dip in and out type of book. There you go. That's what it is, and those are its origins. Now, I thought very carefully whilst researching this. I don't come before you here today as an expert in servant leadership. I'm more someone who's interested in it, is learning about it himself, is dipping quite deeply into the research and the literature and the videos and other forms of stuff that's out there. And I've tried hard to distill that down into key things. So here they are. For me, the characteristics of true servant leader: affinity. Affinity is all about, for instance, if you're a leader within an organizational context, do you believe enough in the purpose of that organization? Do you believe enough in its mission, its like I say, its purpose? Do you believe in the organization that employs you enough to behave in a way that isn't ego driven and that engages the will of others? Now, that's asking quite a lot. And if we think football managers, if you're a football manager and you stay with a top football club for 30 years, I would say you've got an affinity. I would say you have parked your ego. I would say you have a strong association and a belief in that club. If you flip from one club to another every 6 or 8 months, how can you be a servant leader? Oh, I'm a servant leader here for as long as I'm here, and I might be somewhere else in 4 months' time. That doesn't work for me. So for me, a servant leader is someone who actually is strongly embedded within the organization and has a belief in the organization's purpose and values. Humility, very important to be a proper servant leader. You cannot be a servant leader without a degree of humility, a degree of being humble when you need to be. If you are purely self-driven, if you are ego-driven, then that will show in all you do. And that will become how you are perceived by others. So innately, maybe consciously, humility is a definite characteristic of servant leaders. And I think we're already making quite a serious movement from a typical, dare I say, leadership style within organizations and a servant leader. Servant leadership isn't something that a leader can turn or turn off. Today I'll be a servant leader. You either have the capability or you don't. Third on my list is empathy. It kind of goes with everything I'm talking about. You genuinely need to empathize. You really do absolutely need to understand where people are coming from in order to be a servant leader on their behalf. If you haven't got empathy, if you haven't got the ability to engage with people and to genuinely believe and understand where people are coming from, it won't work. Accountability, it's down to me. That's my fault. I'm to blame. I take responsibility for that. Those are the sorts of things a servant leader would say more often than someone who is protective of their ego and for whom being a leader is a narcissistic, vulnerable place where they've got to take all the credit and none of the blame. Authenticity. And again, more ways in which this is differentiating significantly from a typical form of leadership, certainly I've seen in 40 years of working within organizations. You can't be a pretend, insincere servant leader. You either are or you aren't. You either show by your actions that it's who you really are or you're not. So authenticity, this is how I really am, is at the heart of it. So here we go again, 5 more. So what are defining qualities? What do servant leaders need to be able to show they can do and to show they are? Self-awareness. I know who I am. I know my strengths and I'll play on them. I know the areas of my weaknesses and I accept them. I have the humility to accept my imperfections. And that will be something that servant leaders carry into all that they do. Integrity. That means a lot of things to different people. But for me, it means reliability. It means honesty. Emotional intelligence. That's very deeply intrinsically embedded in all we're talking about here. Servant leaders are emotionally intelligent. They have perception, they have sensitivity, they have tolerance, they have restraints, they have all the qualities and can do the behaviors of people who show that they have emotional intelligence, not just say that they have. Modesty kind of goes back to humility and that cluster of things. But these are people who aren't limelight huggers. These are people who stand in the shadows and say, hey, you people, get out there and take credit for it. It's not down to me. And a desire to empower, as opposed to a desire to control as opposed to a desire to overwhelm. This desire to empower is about saying, the people I work with can do more than I can, so let's use their abilities and capabilities. This is good, isn't it? 7 signs of exemplary followers, because servant leaders can't do it on their own. Servant leaders create an environment in which followers become exemplary followers. And when servant leadership works well, their followers, the people that follow them as leaders, their colleagues, will show signs of being leaders themselves. Sometimes the lines are very blurred between who's the leader and who's the follower, because an exemplary follower, as is found where servant leadership is genuinely working, is somebody who focuses on goals, isn't waiting to be told what to do, takes initiative, says, hey, we should do this, it's a better way of doing it than that, and feel okay about that, feel they're not going to be told, no, 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 I'm the leader, you do as you're told. These followers say, I can see a better way. And sometimes they'll just get on with it because they'll know that they're in an environment where that's an okay thing to do. Another thing that exemplary followers do is they can be who they are. So many people feel they have to be someone different because of the leader that they are subject to. But servant leaders encourage people to be who they are with all those imperfections and all those qualities. Show commitment. Again, we're back to affinity. Have a sense of direction, drive, and intensity. All this sort of stuff. Hey, you don't need me to read all this out for you. Review progress, monitor skills, achieve goals. Hey, hey, hey. But innovative, motivative. They're creative people. These followers are much more useful to an organization than passive people who are told what to do. So, is servant leadership possible or impossible? Hey, I'll be honest, I think in most organizations I've worked in, it's impossible. The old ways are too embedded. The command and control leaders are achieving results which are okay. There's a culture of acceptable underperformance whereby I know we could be better, but this is all right, isn't it? Well, what a shame that is, because most organizations could be so much better if their leaders were more skilled and capable. It doesn't take a lot of skill to be a command and control leader. But a servant leader is someone with a much more powerful set of capabilities. And I think that's something which a lot of organizations could do with, but are missing out upon. So there you are. I'm appearing briefly, if only to shut things down. I hope that was useful and helpful.